thank the Film Commission for inviting me to be here. Thanks to the sponsors. Thanks to all you for being here. I'm very happy this is happening today. We are continuing to talk about the business of independent film. Specifically now, we're talking about the role of film exhibition, aka movie theaters, in this process. And we have a great panel here today. As opposed to me giving you this intro, I'm going to have each of y'all intro yourselves if you're comfortable with it. Kevin, do you want to kick it off? Tell us who you are, and we'll just go down the line.
Sure, I'd be glad to. I don't know, am I hitting a button in my own? Okay, there we go. I'm Kevin Rouch. I'm the director of the Drexel Theater in Bexley. I have been there about 5 years, and we just underwent, like Stephanie, we just went through a renovation, about $2.5 million over 3 phases, and opened back up in July of last year. I think we decided a week ahead of you guys, July 15th. Our real challenge as a theater here is, unfortunately, just 3 screens. That comes into play more often than not. And it is trying to find out now, again, where you fit in a town that is great for film exhibition. And we're just trying to, as all theaters, our size and independent theaters generally, just trying to figure out our place in the universe. So we continue to adopt and adapt and do what we can.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. Stephanie, I know you already had an introduction, but do you mind just acclimating us to you?
Reintroducing, sure. Hi, I'm Stephanie Silverman. I'm the executive director of the Belcourt Theater in Nashville. The Belcourt is a 3-screen cinema in kind of the heart of Nashville, near Vanderbilt University, and in a neighborhood called Hillsborough Village. We were formerly 2 screens. With this $5 million renovation, we were able to add a small screening room and an education space, and so have upped our game. But 3 screens seems really amazing to us. We show a really healthy mix of first run and repertory, 50-50, title to title. Of course, we screen the first run more just because it gets real full runs. So.
I'm Chris Hamill, president of Gateway Film Center. We are an 8-screen nonprofit independent located down the street, right on the north side of the Short North and on the south side of the University District.
All right, well, let's hop in. Stephanie, in your keynote, you mentioned that there's this question now of what constitutes a movie, which is a great indicator that the world of movie theaters is really changing in a big way. The last 5-10 years have seen a huge change in what it means to be a movie theater. So I was wondering if each of you could speak a little bit about the current state of film exhibition, of the role of the movie theater in a general sense as you see it.
Sure. I think actually being an exhibitor, and especially an exhibitor like the 3 of us are, it's in a really exciting moment right now. But I would say a decade ago, I came from the performing arts world. I was new to film at that point. The role of the exhibitor had been somewhat minimized, to be frank. I mean, this sort of digital was rolling out. There was all this, you can press play in your box office and the movie will go. It was as if there was no craft to the art of showing movies, that it was just this sort of functional, we just need to pop the popcorn and the people will be there. And I think the conversation has shifted pretty dramatically over the last several years, and that for those of us who really care about the full canon of film, about supporting new work, but making sure works of all the ages are still getting on screen, there's a much bigger focus on being disciplined, being very engaged with your community, having broader conversations around film, and making sure that you're showing the work in the most extraordinary way possible, buying the best equipment, having trained projectionists, really doing the showman part of the job, along with making sure that you're bringing lots of different films to your city. So I think it's a really fun time, actually, to be in the business. It's got lots of challenges, of course.
I agree, by the way, on all fronts. Kevin or Chris, do you have a response?
Sure. So I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think more than ever, our job is around creating communities and supporting communities that at times don't have the experiences they want to have. And I think in this world of digital that you referenced, there's a lot of good things about that, which means it's easier to make films. There are more films to choose from. And to your point from your keynote, it's even hard sometimes to define what is a movie. So I think more than ever, there's a need for curatorial oversight. I mean, it's harder than ever to choose which films to put on screen, and the three of us are in independent nonprofits, and I think we're highly focused on making sure that we choose films that support you, that our community wants to see, and also to make sure that you have an opportunity to see films that maybe wouldn't make it to our cities if we didn't exist.
You know, the challenge for us now is that we compete in a different way than theaters. I'm older than these two, but it was either go to see the film at a theater or don't see it. Today we compete with this, right, from this distance. I have two sons who are involved in filmmaking. One's a screenwriter, so he tells me that's what he does. I have another who is is in graduate school to make documentaries because he wants to live in a small house in the middle of nowhere. No, I kid. They're having a great experience with it. But they grew up, and the phone, being able to watch it like that is what they do. So we have to convince people that watching a film in the collective is the best experience that you can have. And we have a kind of a thank you series to the people that helped us go through the renovation, a free film, once a month, and we're playing the classics. And it was an emotional experience for me to walk in. The first one we did in December was Casablanca. And here was our Art Deco big auditorium and Humphrey Bogart on the screen and a full house. And it was emotional because that's the kind, I wasn't around in the 40s when it was on the big screen, but it was the kind of thing that I envisioned that it would have been like. And so we want to try to recreate that. So how do you do that? We all do everything we can, from bribing college students with free food to adding questions and answers, including people now we can bring in on Skype, trying to add that value added. And it's a challenge. It's different than, again, rolling out the films and making sure the popcorn was fresh. There's just so much that we have to add to it. And for filmmakers, for people, and we, like Stephanie and like Chris, we like to show emerging filmmakers in our theater. And one of the ways we do that, for example, is with a ticket split as opposed to four-walling it. But the thing that I think that's going to be a very crucial part of what we do is to not only show the classics and then show the regular run films, but bring in emerging filmmakers so that it stays alive at all those levels, at exhibition, at creation. And I think that's what you're going to see a lot more in what we do, is us taking a chance on people who are being creative and taking that risk and making film.
That's actually a great segue into what I want to talk about next, Kevin, which is the role of the movie theater, the film exhibitor, in the context of film production. So as far as supporting young filmmakers and local filmmakers, how do each of you see your role or the role of the organizations you represent? Stephanie, you want to start it off again?
Sure. This is actually sort of the question we're asking ourselves right now. So we sort of jumped over this huge hurdle that we'd been working towards, which was the renovation of this theater that was literally crumbling around us. But I think this is the next area of responsibility. So in Tennessee, unlike in Ohio, we don't have tax credits because we don't have a state income tax. So there's no pool there. But we have a strong filmmaking community, a vital filmmaking community. It's actually, our crew base has been built dramatically by the filming of the show Nashville, in Nashville. And so we see that we are the obvious suspect to step up and figure out how to at least bridge the gap from people going to school in Tennessee and learning to be filmmakers in Tennessee to getting some seed funding for their first project. So we're certainly looking at other national models like the Austin Film Society and some others where we will raise our own pool of money that we will then grant out to young filmmakers and work with our city to develop partnerships to provide space and underwritten kinds of tools. But it's an area where we're putting kind of our sort of next growth focus right now.
Nice. Chris?
Well, I think the primary role of cinemas is to inspire young people to become filmmakers. There's a lot of you in the room who probably went to the movies at some point in your life and saw something that made you decide, man, I want to learn how to do that? And so I agree with what Stephanie said. I think it's great if, if you can do that in Nashville. And locally, the Wexner Center for years has helped fund emerging and young filmmakers. But I think for me, I'm most focused on making sure that you get an opportunity to see the kind of films that inspire you and make you want to be a filmmaker.
And I agree with that. I mean, I think we all try to remember that there were films made early on and that we can bring those to everyone. But I also think that we need to bring our expertise in exhibition, how to work the projector so that when you all make films and want someplace to show them or test them. I mean, I think we have an obligation to provide, our asset at all of our theaters is our screen. And if we can keep those lit up as much as possible, that's how we do well. One of the things that we can do is to provide that space to filmmakers who want us, as DCP becomes the only way that you're going to be able to go to festivals at some point. I think we have an obligation to provide access to show you what it looks like on a screen. And so we want to make those kind of resources available to filmmakers. We have an editing station in our theater. We want to get one of the things, and I'm jealous of having an education space, because we're going to have to carve out some education opportunities out of our existing footprint. But I really think that we can provide resources in terms of editing. I think we can provide education space, and I think we can provide exhibition in a way that is helpful to filmmakers. Again, I know what it's like for my kids now in the business to have someone kind of say, okay, let's come in and we'll put it up on the screen and see how it looks. And that's a big deal. And so we want to make that available. I've got time when we are dark and we can make those things happen, because ultimately that helps me down the road. So that's what we're interested in doing.
Kevin, you mentioned the expertise, again, like the art, the show, the showmanship of movie theaters. Chris, you mentioned everybody up here is not only an independent, but a non-profit independent theater. Do you feel like showmanship is like a bigger part when you're a nonprofit or a community-based theater? Or, in what ways, I guess, in addition to showmanship, do you feel like it's different to be a nonprofit or a community-based theater as opposed to a for-profit traditional big-box movie theater?
Well, you want me to go first?
Go for it.
I know you said my name, so I thought maybe that means I got to speak first. You said big box theater.
I did. It's a term that I invented. I don't know if that's true. It's in my mind, though.
Your oratory skills remain top
That's why I
notch.
asked you to do this, right?
I think you're talking about like the megaplexes, like
Yeah.
the big giant theaters.
Yeah, or really, big giant theaters or for-profit theaters.
Well, there aren't a lot of small not a lot of small for-profit theaters left anymore.
That's true.
Of course, when Stephanie and I hang out, she thinks the Gateway's a really big theater. It's true.
So do I.
Okay. Kevin and I don't hang out as much, but Kevin I think I understand your question, John. There's nothing wrong with big movie theaters. They are just in a very different business than we are. They are a commodity business. They are doing the best job they can to bring lots of movies into their communities, and good people work for them and good people run them. And if you choose to go to those, good. I'm glad you're watching movies. I think our worlds are different because of the size of our venues, because of the way we choose to program them. It's much harder to find audiences. We're way more specialized. So I think we all have to be focused on the experience that you have when you're there. And I think that starts with the programming that we choose, but it's also about the relationships we build with our audience and our customers. And we care about you. We want you to be part of what we're trying to accomplish. So I think that's the big difference, John. I think as nonprofit independents, we got to care about our audience in a really different way.
And as filmmakers, the nice thing about being smaller is that we can turn on a dime. So if we have an issue with a projector and the gamma is out of whack, and we can get on that, and we pay attention to that. I only wish that they would unlock films earlier so that we could get to them. That is,
Please.
we all know that midnight on Friday or, early Friday morning waiting for a Friday film is just not as much fun. But we can turn, and then again, with people that come in, especially local filmmakers, we can work on that projection just as a very basic nuts and bolts thing to make sure that it looks good on the big screen, because that's what we're after.
I think, one of the fundamental differences for us and for commercial movie theaters, and, in the same way that in the music world, we expect to have a variety of venues for a variety of different kinds of music. It's funny that in the film world, we've been sort of talked into believing that everything can exist in this sort of one environment, which is crazy. But the thing we get to do is choose from the film first and not from the potential box office revenue first. Which means that we're covering some risk-taking with some donor dollars, but that's the beauty of being in this position. But the responsibility of choosing from the film first then is to know how to talk to your community and to be willing to spend dollars, marketing dollars and other dollars, to get people through the door, so that you're not just relying on the Happy Meals and the New York Times full-page ad, but you have a robust way to communicate with your city through email, through social media, through all of those tools that the commercial theaters aren't using and don't necessarily need to be, because it's a different model. But it's what gives us a unique power to really work with the filmmaker directly to find the right audience for that specific film.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. Something you said that's really, really right on is it's even harder to tell you about the movies we're playing. 10 years ago, you paid more attention to critical reviews. 10 years ago, there were way less films. I'm sure as audience members, you just feel like we're constantly throwing films at you. At the Gateway, we played like 500 films last year. That's about right, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. That checks out.
And at least 500 people saw them. It's exhibition humor.
Painful
Killed.
humor.
Killed.
Yeah.
But it's harder to talk to you. So I think the community building aspect that you talked about in your keynote is more important than ever. And that's the big change, again, is that because there's more films and it's harder to tell you about them, we have to be even better about building community. And those big box stores, that term you invented, John, they're not really doing that.
Well, let's turn it out to y'all. Who has some questions for the audience? Yeah, John, do you have a mic that's going around?
I do have a mic. Does anybody have a quick question?
I think, yeah, go ahead. John's coming to you with a microphone.
Okay, I've got a 65-inch TV at home, and I can get about every film out there and watch it in the comfort of my home. But one of the things I've always enjoyed is in some of these small theaters, or when they premiere a film, having somebody who was involved in the film, maybe the writer of the book, maybe the screenplay writer, the director, producer, an actor or something. Do you guys consider doing any more of these formats? I know, it takes longer and you may have to skip a viewing, but I mean, it turns into a more personal event, as something that's, you guys have great popcorn, okay? But I mean, if I can get the film at home, but this, getting someone to talk about it, Ed Harris, when he made The Abyss, he tells a story about when he was in the bottom of the tank, punching his buttons and he's looking like he's dying. He really was. Somebody rolled a card on his airline. And, just little stories like that about, Harris thought he was such a great acting job, and it turned out that he was suffocating. But, little things like that just kind of add a value to it. You guys seem like you can do it. AMC's not going to.
Yeah, I think we would all love to have a Q&A for every film that we have, because it draws attention, it gets a lot of people to kick it off. And I think what you're going to see is the technology, because it is so good now. For example, with Skype, we did not have, just because of our building, the way it was configured, we couldn't do it prior to our renovation. We can now. We had Diablo Cody. Our first guest was Diablo Cody, which was a hoot. I got to tell you, she's something. She did it from her son's bedroom in Los Angeles, and he walked in, so I know it was authentic, that's where she was. But that's what we're trying to do, and we would love to do that all the time, but flying for us, it's a little more difficult to fly folks in and to do that, but we're always trying to find a local connection with the film in some way, and that's the advantage of making movies here in Ohio, for example. we then have a pool of people that we can bring in, and I would do it every film if we could.
Yeah, we do it as much as we possibly can, both through Skype and through live, and it's not always someone directly affiliated with the film. Sometimes it's someone talking about something that's topical. When we had our, the opening week of I'm Not Your Negro, we had a different poet every night reading their poetry. So it can be all kinds of different things, and I do think that's something that we're all thinking about more and more. But I do think the other thing is, I know people have big TVs, but I do think fundamentally, not every night you want to sit by yourself and your big TV. And that is something that, in the same way that we have kitchens and restaurants that keep surviving, even though we have both, I think movie theaters will always have that role as the communal space and as the place where people just want to be around humanity, even if you're going by yourself. There are very few places where you can easily go by yourself and feel like you're in a community, and movie theaters are one of those places. So I think making sure that environment is safe and comfortable and all of those good things, and then adding depth to the screenings as much as possible. And one thing I would say for filmmakers is making movies is long and hard, and it's different than being a musician. But the minute you put an album out as a musician, you go on the road and you support that work. And it's one thing that can be hard as an exhibitor sometimes, is getting a filmmaker who's finally put that thing in the can and got a damn distributor to move it around the country, and to then want to give more time and energy to talk to audiences. But I really do feel like it will recharge them as an artist, and it will sure help sell tickets to their movie. So I would love even more for artists to sort of schedule that into their release window.
I think you're right. I think this is where digital might have hurt us a little bit. When there were 5 35 millimeter prints traveling around the country for a film, we were able to secure filmmakers much more frequently. But I think you're right on. First off, I'm glad you're watching movies, even on your 65-inch TV. But I'll also say that because we're in Nashville and we're in Columbus, sometimes it's hard to secure talent. We do a lot of times try to bring in user groups or local community members who have a vested interest or know something about the film that you're about to watch. So even if we can't get the talent from the film, we try to create an experience for you that you couldn't have at home. So I would add that. I know Kevin and Stephanie both try to do that as well.
Also tonight, opening night at Focal at this very theater has a production designer, right? For
Correct,
the Bad Batch. For the Bad Batch is going to be here. And Saturday night, Euro Spectacular Men is playing, and the director, Leah Thompson, will be here.
Sunday night.
What is that?
Sunday.
Sunday night, excuse me.
That's okay.
So there are opportunities around. All right, who else has a question? Yeah. I think John's going to bring you a microphone. John's getting a full
He's
day's
sprinting, I'm
workout
watching
today.
him. I can't see a lot, but
I
can see
forgot
John
my
running.
running shoes.
Hi, my name is Matt Hubbard, local filmmaker. Wondering how much communication do you guys have between independent theaters and independent theater operators? And my concept is, where I'm going with this is, as an independent filmmaker who's trying to find theatrical release for their movie, is there some sort of independent film house network that we can do a grassroots theatrical release? And basically, I don't know, is there communication between all of these art house theaters that could make something like that happen?
Well, there is. First off, I'll say that I think all of us talk quite a bit, but all these independents and then add the nonprofits in, we're all understaffed and scattered, and we're always making jokes about being the plumber and the janitor as well as the guy who's exhibiting your film. But Stephanie's one of the founders of Health Convergence, and that's a network of, how many theaters are participating in that now?
I think it's about 150.
Yeah, so I think there's more communication than ever. Again, there's more product than ever, so sometimes it's hard to cut through the noise. But I think the thing that you're alluding to is happening. And I think it's happening both on the feature side and the short film side. You guys want to add to that?
Yeah, I think one thing we found through the Art House Convergence, because this was certainly one thing we looked at, is it possible to be a network? And the trick is, for those of us doing sort of living in the independent world, each community is very distinct, and a film will play well, and a programmer will know it in that community, and not as well in another community, and that doesn't really help you as a filmmaker because, you know, it's a giant world, and finding 150 people scattered across the U.S. is tricky. But the Convergence is a network, and it's certainly a network that filmmakers have availed themselves of and have gotten films through. And then I think the other thing we're seeing as programmers is that there are more creative distribution entities. So whether it's someone like Michael Tuckman, I don't know if people know Michael Tuckman, but he's sort of acting as an independent distributor for a lot of great films and a lot of great filmmakers who don't fit in the old kind of paradigm as easily, that he's got the relationships with programmers across the country and really can customize a strategy that makes sense and even get a few programmers in the room to give advice. And so I think some of this is evolving. I know Sundance is trying to do it with their artist services. I think they're still we're kind of working to figure that out. I think it's finding out, because we are all understaffed and there isn't a really efficient way to do it, it is kind of getting in the network a little bit. And I will say, the one thing the Art House Convergence has every day is a Google group. And if you Google the Google group for Art House Convergence, you can become a member, and you'll see programmer voices and theaters all over asking questions and sort of thinking through the way they do what they do.
Great, thank you very much. Quick round of applause. Real quick, I wanted to introduce Len Hartman. I spoke earlier today about the Ohio Film Group starting a financing division. Len, if you want to give a couple words about what you're up to.
Hi. We're the Ohio Film Group. I'm Len Hartman. We're just literally a block that away on Broad Street. And we opened up about a year and a half ago. We're a full post house. We've worked with about 17 films now. And we have a number that we're working with this summer, mostly films that are utilizing the Ohio Film Tax Credit that are coming into Ohio for various, in various locations, Cleveland, Cincinnati, a few in Columbus. In that capacity, we've also established a film financing department where we are looking for projects mostly that are already have equity in place, but that are looking for that cash flow at tax credit, cash flow in MG, looking for some a gap loan, finishing money to get the project done, and obviously we would be interested in working with you as a post house in that capacity. So we aren't providing equity at this time, but we are helping people find equity for the right projects with the right kind of cast, and that's pretty much it. That's the nuts and bolts of it.
Cool, thanks, Len. He has some cards laying out on the tables. I know you have to run. There's some cards on the tables. If you have questions, grab a card, drop him an email. Next up, we're going to do John Sherman, an education panel. So you guys want to make your way up front.